Hello, everyone. Thank you for participating in the Minute's Silence and welcome to the Biotron Investor Webinar. I'm Rudy Michelson of Monsoon Communications. Today's webinar will update shareholders on the Biotron acquisition of Sedarex and provide more information on Sedarex's operations. Joining us are CEO and Managing Director Michelle Miller and Non-Executive Director of Sedarex, Graeme Wald. Before we begin, let me point out you can submit questions using the Q&A function and we'll get to them after the presentation. I'll now hand over to Michelle Miller to lead the presentation.
Well, thank you, Rudy, and thank you to everybody who is registered to attend today, and welcome to those who may be viewing this webinar later on. This, as we know, is being recorded and will be, once it's been finalised and available, will be available on Biotron's website later on today. So I thought there was a good opportunity to have a follow-up webinar to the one that Graeme and I held on the 15th of October, the day that we announced the acquisition of Sedarex. I think it's important to outline why we really like this acquisition, and also have the opportunity to tell you all from Graeme some more technical details and some more about the background of the technology. I think, from Biotron's perspective and from our shareholders' perspective, this is a really interesting opportunity. We believe that the acquisition of Sedarex really positions the Biotron for significant growth and diversification. I should say that it is not an unusual thing for biotech companies to grow by acquiring other assets and other companies along the way. It's a very standard way for companies to continue to grow and provide shareholder value. By acquiring Sedarex, we're expanding beyond our antivirals. Sedarex is a patented next-generation general anaesthetic that has significant improvements over the current standard of care propofol, and Graeme will cover some more information around that shortly. But why we like it, and I have to say that Biotron has looked at a number of different technologies, is that it is a significant opportunity compared to a lot of the early stage technologies that are out there. This is an advanced, largely de-risked asset. It's a drug that has previously been on market. There's good existing clinical data. It addresses large markets, large growing markets, especially with an aging population. And there is also the potential for a fast path to market, especially in the European marketplace. It broadens our portfolio of clinical assets across additional therapeutic areas. That's always good for de-risking. There are always trends within the pharmaceutical industry and with regard to licensing, and having strength in that area is a very good thing for all concerned. And we believe that the acquisition of Sedarex provides significant upside for Biotron shareholders with significant value-adding near-term milestones. I think it's also important to note that this is not, a takeover by Sedarex. This is not a backdoor listing. The acquisition of Sedarex will not impact on the ongoing development of Biotron's antiviral programs. Biotron remains very committed and focused on developing effective therapies for unmet medical needs and achieving commercial outcomes for all of its programs. At this point, I'd like to just briefly mention our hepatitis B. We've talked about this as an early stage program for some time. It has not been Biotron's major focus. The major focus has been its clinical programs, in particular as HIV, and we continue to be focused on achieving commercial outcome for that. But the hepatitis B in particular has reached a really interesting stage. We have new novel compounds. It's not BIT225. These are new compounds with new IP, and long runway ahead of it. These compounds have shown great activity against Hep B in a range of preclinical studies, reducing levels of cccDNA, which is what you want to see reduced, as well as other key viral markers. Preliminary animal studies have shown no toxicity issues. And I guess it's analogous in a way to HIV in that Hep B can be treated with drugs to stop replication, but these don't eradicate the virus. So it's a large market, as we know, over 2 billion people worldwide have been infected, and over 250 million are chronically infected, and it's the leading cause of liver cancer. So Biotron's aim is not to take this and to continue this through to late stage development. Our aim is to take this through to demonstrating safety in a phase 1 trial, and then partner for clinical development in combination with other hepatitis B agents, which is the way that Hep B drugs are being developed internationally. Now, at this point in time, I'm going to reintroduce Graeme Wald to you, and he's going to provide some additional details around the Sedarex opportunity. Graeme.
Good morning, everybody. So thank you, Michelle and Rudy, for putting this together. So Sedarex is developing a new formulation of a active ingredient that was very well used in the European markets in the 70s and 80s. It's a general anesthetic, and the new formulation that we've developed offers a number of advantages over the current market leader, which is propofol, and also some of the fluorines. Propofol is the white, milky substance that many of you may be familiar with that is injected intravenously, and the fluorines are generally gases which are administered to patients. Next slide, please. So we have this patented improved formulation. It's from a proven general anesthetic that was on the market in Europe for about 14 years, and it had up to about a 50% share of the UK market. The advantages that our formulation has over the previous one is the solubilizing agent. So while the previous formulation was well accepted in Europe, there were a number of patients who developed anaphylaxis or an allergic reaction. So Glaxo, who had brought that product to market, voluntarily withdrew it. And it was only years later that it was worked out that the actual cause of the anaphylaxis had nothing to do with the active ingredient, but was due solely to the solubilizing agent that was used at that time. So we fixed that issue. What we've also found is that the formulation offers superior benefits to the current products on the market, being neuroprotection, improved cardiovascular and cognition support. There isn't any stinging upon administration, which some of you may be familiar with. Excuse me. And a key selling point for many people is that it actually would allow hospitals and day surgeries to reduce patient recovery times, which would allow for increased patient volume throughput, and that relates to the neuroprotection and the cognition issues. Next slide, please, Michelle. So, we're planning on relaunching this reformulated version into a very, very large market. The global anesthetic market is in excess of $5 billion per annum and is growing at 3.3%. As I said, we're replacing the solubilizing agent that was used before, Cremophor, replacing that with a known and proven safe and approved by the FDA and EMA solubilizing agent, shortened to SBECD. Another important factor here is that demographics are driving a need for this product. This is particularly so for older patients, many of whom do already suffer from cognitive issues, and this formulation supplies some degree of cognitive protection. And it will also be used, we believe, widely in the ICU setting, because that is where you get patients being administered, for example, propofol over extended periods of time, and that can lead to neurological issues as well. Next slide, please. So alfaxolone is the active ingredient, and the solubilizing agent that we use is called sulfur-butyl ether cyclodextrin, which is already approved by the FDA and the EMA as an excipient or a solubilizing agent, call it what you want there. It is widely used in a number of, well, in other drugs and formulations already. And we have patent protected this formulation. So we've done a lot of work has been done on this. The original work was done by Colin Goodchild and Juliet Serrao. And we've done animal trials, and the reference is there. So if people want to check up on these publications, there are the references. And it's shown to have a high therapeutic index, better than propofol, less cardiovascular depression than propofol. In other words, it's safer. And alfaxolone itself has been very, very successful in the veterinary market. So we weren't too surprised at those findings. But alfaxolone is widely used in the veterinary market. So what do we mean by some of these safety issues? Firstly, in one of our trials, and the reference is there, we compared propofol to our formulation. And you can't do placebo-controlled trials for an anaesthetic, of course, because people will scream out in pain as soon as something happens. So we compare it with the standard of care, and the standard of care is propofol. And if you look at the drop in blood pressure, you can see that it is nowhere near as marked as that for propofol. And this is a very common occurrence with propofol. Anaesthetists are very aware of it, and they have at the ready a number of drugs to help reverse that drop in blood pressure if it becomes too serious. Now, the older the patient gets, the more aware the anaesthetist needs to be of this, because a drop in blood pressure in an older patient with significant comorbidities could be a nasty experience. If you look at the right-hand slide, that's the diastolic blood pressure. You can see as well there that we are significantly better than propofol. Of course, the question is, well, maybe this was due to changes in heart rate. There you see we have the exact same heart rate in the middle slide compared with propofol. So this is purely a blood pressure issue, nothing to do with heart rate, and we are significantly safer than propofol. Next slide, please. We also did what we called a phase 2A. Some people have called it a pilot phase 3 clinical trial. And in this trial, we demonstrated that patients have significantly improved cognition. Do you want to just move on to the next slide? I think there could be something missing there. Yep. Okay. So we compared patients who received propofol to those who received our formulation. And, we put them under, and then about 30 minutes after we stopped giving them anesthetic, we asked them to do a quiz. And the results were quite startling, showing that cognition is significantly better in patients who received alfaxolone or our formulation compared with propofol. And this is something that we would expect would be far more dramatic the older the patient is, and potentially the longer that a patient is under sedation. Next slide, please. So we've completed animal trials. We completed a phase 1 human trial. We completed a phase 2A trial. We've also had a pre-IND meeting with the FDA, and we have the official minutes from that. We've worked out what the target product profile should be, and also we conducted a market survey to try and ascertain what the demand would be for such a product from anaesthetists. So we've been through this already. Reduced blood pressure, the problems: reduced blood pressure, a reduction in respiration, and the potential to damage brain function. And we understand the mechanism by which alfaxalone prevents the damage to brain function. It goes to something called brain-derived neurotrophic factors, and we fully understand the mechanism there, and it's been verified by independent parties. Next slide, please, Michelle. So if one looks at the Sedarex formulation compared with, say, propofol and the fluorines, which I discussed earlier, in all cases, rapid sleep onset and fast wake-up time, although we think that Sedarex is better on the wake-up time. But we have significantly improved cardiovascular safety, breathing safety, less damage to brain function. Also, an important point is infection safety. One has to realize that with propofol, it is also the active ingredient there is also insoluble. So propofol is actually an emulsion, and the emulsifier in many cases is simply egg whites, and that can lead to significant safety issues because it's a wonderful breeding ground for all sorts of nasty bugs rather, and you don't get that issue with our formulation. We don't think we'll have a FDA black box warning, we also are led to believe at the moment that there will be significant safety, occupational health and safety benefits compared with both propofol and fluorines. The fluorines are a gas. They're highly volatile gases, and there are many safety issues that need to be put in place in the operating theatre to make sure that anaesthetists and other staff in the room are not inhaling the fluorines when they shouldn't be. Next slide, please. So we did an anonymous survey of around 155 anaesthetists. We just gave them the target product profile. We didn't mention what the active ingredient was, but we said to them, we've got, this is how long it takes a patient to fall asleep. This is how long it takes them to wake up. This is what happens to their blood pressure, their heart rate, etc., showing all these things. Then we asked them, what sort of patients would you give this to compared with propofol? So if you look at the left part there, you can see that this new anesthetic, as we described it, out of the 155 anaesthetists, 91 out of 155 would prefer to use the new formulation. 56 would probably use it, and it is quite a dramatic number who would not use propofol or any of the current anesthetics. So, and then if you go to the next set of graphs, second from the left, what would you use on a patient with severe respiratory disease? Also, it is quite significant that they would prefer the new formulation. It's only on a healthy patient that they would decide, well, they would use either one of them, and that simply goes to what they're used to at the moment. In a case of a multi-trauma patient, overwhelmingly they would use our product compared with what they have at the moment, and that goes to a case of head injury as well. So we believe that there would be significant uptake by anaesthetists once they become aware of this product on the market. Next slide. We've been through a lot of this already. It's a very large market for general anesthetic drugs. Aging population, knee, hip, cardiac procedures are increasing in the older patients. That leads to an increase in ICU admissions, and propofol has a 60% market share in the ICU sector. And what we mean by the ICU sector here is where patients need to be sedated for long periods of time. Long periods could be anything from a day to weeks to months even, depending on the severity of what the patient has. And you can imagine then what the negative effects could be on cognition the longer they are on drugs like propofol. If our product is available on the market, we're quite confident that would be rapidly taken up in the ICU sector as well. Next, Michelle. Again, we've looked at some of these competitive advantages. This is just emphasizing the ICU markets. Propofol 57 to 60%. You've got a bunch of others there, the benzodiazepines, which is similar to Valiums, and dexamethasone and remifentanil, which are also well used, but the big one to go after, of course, would be propofol. Next, Michelle. And this also highlights a significant problem that needs to be solved. I've tried to emphasize elderly patients, how severely they are affected by current anesthetics. And this has been recognized in numerous publications. And this is a quote from the JAMA on August the 2nd, 2021. Among patients aged 65 years and older, an estimated 65% of them experience delirium and 10% develop long-term cognitive decline after non-cardiac surgery. So this is a problem that is recognized, the cognitive issues, and we believe we have the solution for this, and therefore we believe it will be taken up well by the market. Michelle? We've had discussions with the FDA, and they've indicated to us that the appropriate pathway to go would be a 505(b)(2), which means that we can rely on literature and some other safety studies without having to go through a phase 1, phase 2 formally for them. So, we're very confident of being able to get this product to market in the US. I just need to point out to you that the original formulation, althecin as it was known, was never approved by the FDA. And what we mean by that also is that no application was made by Glaxo to the FDA for marketing in the US. Why? We do not know. That's lost in the mists of time. As I said, it was approved in Europe, and we will try and get this product to market without going through a large or a formal clinical trial. The reason for that is because, remember, this was on market as althecin in Europe, and that means that there is the possibility, could even call it a probability, that we could get this product to market as a generic drug. Generic is used here in the legal term. It's got nothing to do with price. What it means is we do not have to perform large-scale trials. All we need to do is prove the same bioavailability that the drug had and the same effects that the original drug had. And that is, in fact, one of the milestone payments or bonus payments that would be expected from Biotron. And that's getting the formal a formal report from the EMA about the appropriate path forward. Michelle, next slide. Yep, so that's althecin as it was there, and that's just a snapshot from a publication where it was shown that as of March 1977, 3 million doses had been administered. So we're fairly confident in the safety of the product, excluding the Cremophor. Next slide. This is just going through some more stuff again about our formulation, which is with the SBECD, and the fact that it's also widely used in the veterinary industry, but in a totally different formulation, which is unsuitable for humans. Target product profile, we've already dealt with. Just to highlight for you, though, that there are 2 stages, or in fact, there's actually 3 stages, but the regulatory authorities in the US look at 2 stages of general anesthesia. The first is induction, where they're actually putting you under. The second is maintenance, where they maintain you and where they maintain the anesthesia. And that is, and that's counted as 2 different indications. The FDA minutes that we have are indicating that in the same trial, phase 3 trial, induction and maintenance can be worked on the same patient at the same time. The Europeans make no distinction. Next slide, please. As I indicated earlier, we hope to get accelerated regulatory pathway in Europe by the EMA, the European Medicines Authority. And that just gives you an idea of what sort of valuations we would hope to get. These are not forecasts, but they're just giving you an indication of what sort of valuations we would hope to receive. Next slide. Similarly for the US, also very large market, as you could appreciate. Again, these are not forecasts; they're just aspirations of what we believe we could achieve. So there you have it, and happy to take questions at a later stage. Back to you, Rudy. Or Michelle.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to the Q&A. If you have any questions, you can continue to submit them using the Q&A function. We have had quite a few pre-submitted questions, and let me power through those. The first one is the peak placement done without AGM shareholder approval. What are the rules around placements and fundraising vis-a-vis the AGM, Michelle?
I have a couple of slides to finish off, actually, Rudy, but it's
okay.
actually your timing of that question is pretty perfect for this. So as we've said, the financing for this transaction is led by Peak Asset Management. I should actually say the deal itself is a script for script, but in terms of financing to fund the work that's needed to be done on Sedarex, as well as ongoing work to be done with Biotron, is to be funded by a placement in 2 tranches. Tranche 1, which is already completed, was done under listing rules by which a company can subscribe, can do a placement of up to 15% of issued capital without shareholder approval. And that is what was done, raising $597,000, and that was recently completed. Now, the reason for doing that, and of course, just to continue that, the second tranche, because it's above that 15% limit, will be subject to shareholder approval at the AGM. So this is, being approval is not needed to place 15% of issued capital. And there's very specific rules around that and the type of people who can subscribe to that. This is done at arm's length by Peak as the lead manager to their clients, and there's very particular rules and regulations around who is considered a sophisticated investor for taking shares under such offerings. So the timing of this was announced in conjunction with the acquisition of Sedarex, and this is, we're buying, they're selling, and I think everybody needed some surety around the fact that there would be some funds available to take this technology forward. It's important for Sedarex as well to know that the company had some funds available for this technology, which is why the first tranche was done at the time when we announced the transaction. We're always aware of shareholders and we always do want to take care of shareholders when we do any capital raising. That's always our prime concern. And so shareholders will be offered the ability to participate on the same terms as the placement via a rights issue. And the rights issue, non-renounceable rights issue, will follow shareholder approval for the acquisition of Sedarex at the upcoming AGM. So that's, and just before I go back to Rudy for some of the other questions, because I think there's likely to be questions around this. The transaction itself is a script for script deal. So Sedarex will be issued shares in Biotron. There's no cash changing hands. So in the first instance, the deal itself, the total deal is $2 million, $1.5 million in the first instance, where they'll be issued 500 million Biotron shares at 0.003 cents per share. And in addition to that, we try to de-risk this for our shareholders by having 2 performance milestones. And on achievement of those, there'll be another $500,000 worth of Biotron shares, 250 for each, on achievement of these particular milestones. If these milestones aren't reached, then Sedarex doesn't receive those additional shares. So I think that's, there's been some questions perhaps around that. And before we just go back to the questions, I just want to say so the outlook for this next 12 months, the focus will be on achieving the two key milestones for the Sedarex technology. As Graeme so clearly pointed out, we really are focused initially on the European regulatory pathway, primarily because the API has already been previously approved in that market. There's been some preliminary discussions had by Sedarex with advisors for that in that market. So a formal milestone will be for next year is getting formal guidance from the EMA regarding the pathway, and that's to be achieved before the 31st of July next year. The second main focus for next year will be something we've not really spoken a lot about, but in addition to the general anaesthetic opportunity, there's some really interesting blue sky potential for the Sedarex product being reformulated for a different disease indication in the neuroscientific space. We're not able to say much more than that due to the need for to ensure our patent position over that. The key thing is that we can generate some data quickly to show the potential for this in an animal model of that disease. So that's more information will come out as that work proceeds next year. And the milestone to demonstrate efficacy of a new formulation in a disease model, animal disease model for this new indication is another key milestone and a performance milestone for the Sedarex technology. And that's to be achieved by the end of next year. In addition, Biotron will continue to work on its, especially its Hep B program, completing tox studies on the lead drug and doing scale-up process development to position it for, to be ready for first-in-man safety study. I just really want to reiterate to everybody, we really believe that this is a significant development and commercial opportunity for Biotron. It positions us with a clear commercialization pathway in multi-billion-dollar markets. It's well-differentiated product, Sedarex, that is, which has obvious advantages over current general anaesthetics, and especially in the increasingly aging population. We like the blue sky potential in new markets, which offer a really significant upside on top of the general anaesthetic. The placement and the rights issue will provide funding for the technologies through to key value inflection points. And we believe that this is a really compelling asset with the potential to provide significant returns for shareholders. And of course, I'll reiterate that, of course, this is subject to shareholder approval at our AGM on the 17th of November. So, Rudy?
Thank you, Michelle. That did answer a few more questions, but I'll fairly liberally read these out anyway. How can Biotron afford to buy another company? Well, you've just answered that. It's a script-based purchase. Why has Biotron not involved a major pharmaceutical company in development of products? I think you partially addressed that in your presentation. Is there anything you want to add to the commercialization?
Look, we're continuing to commercialize the antiviral portfolio. It's been a tough year. It's a tough year, not just for Biotron, but across the board within the pharmaceutical industry. The uncertainty in the US markets and some of the changes within the FDA have made pharma very risk averse. There's certainly, as we know, there's a lot of anti-vaccine rhetoric, and it's certainly infectious diseases has been caught up with that. That doesn't mean that that's not going to change, and we certainly do see signs that that will change going into 2026. But I do want to reiterate that every market is a buyer and a seller. And at this point in time, pharma are just sitting on their hands, sitting on their money. There's a lot of companies doing what we're doing, looking at bringing in other technologies to de-risk and take things further, and so you can continue to develop and continue to drive shareholder value while the market opportunities in terms of commercialization improves, hopefully through to into the new year.
Let me group two questions into one. Congrats on the addition of our company. We need to work on improving the share price, and more news flow would be very nice.
And I think we all agree with that. You know, the thing about news flow is tricky. Everybody always wants more news flow. It has to be something significant to say. The ASX won't let you just shoot the breeze out there with announcements. It has to be something substantial. We all throughout are now focused on bedding down this transaction. There will be key news flow coming out around this. Having the support of Peak in particular will really assist us in that regard. And like everybody, all of us want to get the value share price of this company up where it belongs.
In relation to issuing the new shares, who are the new investors, and what was the agreement or arrangement relating to the issue of those shares?
Look, I think I've already addressed this. This is a placement that's being done on normal commercial terms that placements are done at. It's done at arm's length, nothing to do with the company. It's done with Peak as a lead manager with their clients. And unless their shareholdings go above a particular percentage, they don't need to be announced in terms of who they are to the market.
Okay, we've got a few technical questions in a row that might be more for Graeme. Sedarex delivers about 46 grams a day of SBECD. Not sure I know what that is.
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Far exceeding FDA EMA limits and renal safety thresholds. What evidence supports regulatory approval? As management assess feasibility, including any updates or improvements since Hooper's 2018 study?
Is that Hooper or Hoover?
It says Hooper here, but it might.
Okay, I'm familiar with the study by Hoover, and I think that's where what this questionnaire, this investor may be referring to. So, firstly, we have taken this formulation to the FDA. We've had a formal meeting with them, known as a pre-IND meeting. They didn't indicate any issues whatsoever with the levels of SBECD, which is sulfobutyl ether cyclodextrin, in the formulation. And I think the paper that's being referred to is a study that was conducted on patients who had various stages of renal failure, looking at how quickly they could metabolize an antibiotic in which SBECD was used as a solubilizing agent. And sure, you know, if a patient has got kidney failure, renal issues, then there are going to be issues, and you're going to have to watch out for them, which is no different from any other drug. But that paper, which I believe is being referred to there, the conclusion of that paper was quite clear that SBECD remains a safe solubilizing agent. But there are going to be patients where, you know, who have comorbidities, and one just has to take those into account. But I also want to emphasize that the FDA did not indicate any problems to us with our formulation in the pre-IND meeting.
And look, this next question sounds very similar. Why has management not disclosed that Sedarex could be effectively unusable under FDA safety limits? And what is the estimated financial and operational risk to shareholders if the FDA restricts or rejects approval? I think you've largely answered it with what you just said.
Yeah, I believe so. And, you know, I'll put it this way: in terms of other products that it is used in, it's used in something, you know, in other IV formulations. For example, in patients who are unable to eat. And the nutritional medications need to be solubilized as well, and it's used widely in that as well.
Okay, let's move on. Has there been an FDA pre-IND discussion specifically addressing SBECD accumulation and related risks?
Well, we told them what the formulation was, and the response was, you can rely on safety data that's already been published.
Okay. At the last seminar, there was a request for peer-reviewed papers. How can someone access peer-reviewed papers relevant to these operations?
Well, maybe I could, and maybe Michelle wants to take this, or I'll give it a go. In the presentation that is going up on the Biotron website, the references are given there. So I'm more than happy for people to go look after those, to go find them. Please, and I'm sure Michelle will agree, there are copyright issues. We can't go and put formal links to them, but all the references are there, and people can go look them up.
Okay, there's a question here. This was pre-submitted, asking for details of Sedarex trials and success rate. And you've really covered that with your presentation, and there was a slide which particularly outlined that. So I'm not sure we need to delve further into that, Graeme. Would adding Sedarex to Biotron's other IP increase chances of finding a buyer for Biotron's IP? This is probably more a question for you, Michelle.
Well, absolutely. That's the whole point of doing this, is so that we can be an attractive for a potential partner. Like, we believe that this is something that there's a clear market opportunity, there's a clear unmet medical need, it's a clearly differentiated product, and that we believe will be an attractive thing, for partners. And the other thing is mentioned again, is the blue sky opportunity for additional indications, which will be really exciting. We're looking forward to being able to talk more about that next year.
Okay, how many staff are employed by Sedarex? What are their positions and duties, and how many research contracts are active, and what is the value of these contracts?
There are no staff employed by Sedarex at the moment, and we do not have any contracts in place.
There's a question. These questions have been submitted since the webinar began. Who new shareholders in tranche 1? I think we've dealt with that already. What is happening with C14 and the HIV antiviral? I think that's been largely dealt with. Anything? I'm not sure that there's anything to add there. I have read that the FDA gives approval for SBECD in the ICU for only a maximum of 6 hours. Is that something you care to comment on, Graeme? Is that a sufficient question to be able to respond meaningfully to?
All I can say is that we will be actively discussing these things with the FDA.
Where are the patients held, and what company holds them? Is that, I presume that's referring to clinical trials, but it's hard to decipher what we're trying to get at with that question.
Patients aren't held by anyone.
I don't know. I think that's a question that doesn't need answering. It's not a question.
Okay. Well, that concludes the questions. There are no further questions. So I'll hand back to you now, Michelle, for closing remarks.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you, Rudy and Monsoon, for hosting today, and thank you, Graeme, for attending and so clearly outlining some more information around Sedarex. This presentation set of slides have been released to the ASX, will be available on Biotron's website via an announcement, and the webinar will be available once it's been finalised, fixed up, and is available, which takes a few hours to achieve and will be on the website. But thank you all for your attention today. As I said, we think this is a really exciting opportunity. We've looked at a lot of different things. There's a lot of stuff out there that is uninvestable, as Graeme, he knows, and I know from my past life. And this is something that sort of hits a really nice sweet spot. And we look forward to working with Sedarex and developing this to everybody's benefit. Thank you.
As do we. Thank you very much, Rudy, and thank you, Michelle.